Good morning. My name is Erica Gabriel, and today we'll be discussing my analysis on Terry stops in Seattle, Washington. A little background: in Terry versus Ohio, the Supreme Court held that the search undertaken by the officer involved was reasonable because he acted on more than just a hunch under the Fourth Amendment, which protects people against unreasonable search and seizure. I was tasked with building a classifier model to predict whether an arrest was made after a Terry stop. The model performed at 99.87% accuracy, but most interestingly, the most relevant feature was the year the stop was reported. So I got curious and dove into the mean year, which was 2017, and pulled up some of Seattle Times' top news stories of that year to see what was going on there. The first thing I wanted to investigate was how demographics influence the outcomes of community policing. So as you can see here, African Americans make up 6.1% of Seattle's population. However, they make up 1/3 of the Terry stop demographics. So I also dove into the demographics of the reporting officers. 76 of them identify as white and male. I also felt that it was important to plot the officer year of birth with the races because the time period that you were born in and you were raised in speaks to mindset and also worldview, which is shaped by experiences. For instance, a white officer who was born in the 1950s and 60s would definitely have a different set of experiences and worldview than, say, a Black or Latino officer who was born in the 1980s. And now getting to the demographics of gender. Women make up 49% of Seattle's population. However, they only make up 1/5 of the reporting officers and a little under 40% of the Terry stop subjects. So it raised the question for me, are women generally seen as non-threatening or less threatening by society? Do officers commonly let their guard down around women? And could this be a blind spot? Next, I wanted to investigate what influences a hunch, or more than just a hunch, as stated by the Supreme Court, and on what basis are these hunches made and how those factors influence instinct and their impact to residents. So the most common calls were 911 and on view, police-initiated stops. So I compared this to the beat demographics, the patrol areas of the officers, so to speak. And the top two areas where these calls were reported and stops were made were N3, as you see here, and E2, as you see circled here. And this is a photo of Seattle's diversity index. So as we go down to the key, we see that the gold dots represent white residents, pink dots represent Black or African American residents, and green represents Asian residents. As we see in these circled areas, a lot of gold, meaning that these areas are predominantly white areas. So this raised the question for me, well, actually to backpedal. In addition to the top two call types being 911 and on view, the top two reasons for stops were listed as suspicious person and suspicious stop. So for me, it raised the questions, well, what is suspicious? Is it a measurable and trainable criteria under the law and under the police force? And does that criteria look the same across genders and across races? So how does that instinct, that worldview, so to speak, help a cop to train their instinct to identify what is suspicious or not? Lastly, I wanted to get into the age groups of the subjects who were stopped and whether or not they were weapons carriers. As we can see, as pointed out by the key, 0 means that that person was not carrying a weapon, and 1 indicates that they were. So people in the age group 26 to 35 were the most stopped out of all the subjects, but also were the highest group that were carrying weapons. More surprisingly, I saw that children ages 1 through 17 were being stopped, but not only were they being stopped, some of them were actually carrying weapons. So I dove into Seattle's, the state of Washington's um, law regarding um, weapons carrying, and it's pretty open to interpretation. So to purchase a handgun, you have to be at least 21 years of age, but you can possess a handgun if you are on private property, as well as possessing long guns of that nature, excluding semi-automatic weapons. So it leaves room for people to create a gray area, if you will. My final recommendations, recruit more minorities and women to be police officers and representatives of the law. At a bare minimum, the police force as well as lawmakers should be reflective of the communities that they are serving. There should be a strict minimum age limit restricting all access to weapons for individuals under the age of 21, purchasing and possessing. In addition, access to weapons should be restricted to parents who have children under the age of 18 in the home, so that those kids don't get their hands on weapons easily and hurt someone, potentially themselves. 911 dispatchers and officers should be enrolled in annual implicit bias training. Now, why 911 dispatchers? Because as the fielders of those calls, they need to be trained in asking those pressing questions to get to the heart of, is an actual threat imminent, or could this be bias at play? And just taking the additional minute to do this could save the officers time, the city money, and also be good PR. Health plans should be expanded so that officers can have access to free therapy. We definitely want to make sure that the people who are tasked to protect us have an outlet for their stresses and anxieties and any battles they might be facing before they get out into the field. Lastly, police officers should be partnered with licensed counselors to deal with individuals with mental health issues and abuse victims. An officer may see a person exhibiting suspicious or strange behavior, but that person could also be having a mental breakdown or be having an episode. And a counselor is licensed and trained to deal with that individual in a way that is safe for everyone involved. And also, this counselor can help to check officer biases in real time. Now, while the cost of these new measures seems expensive, it will offset the cost of class action lawsuits for harassment and profiling, civil rights violations, and wrongful death suits. In the future, I'd like to collect more data on stops per beat and precinct and gather data on subjects who had weapons but had permits to carry. I'd also like to have a wider discussion on how laws can be better crafted or avoided so that minorities are not unfairly targeted. Thank you.